When the COVID-19 pandemic broke out, we were in the middle of winter retreat. And there was a friend of the Abbey in Singapore who sent me an email. And, she asked, how is everyone doing at the Abbey? And she said, I don't know if you've heard, there's been a rise in hate crimes against Asian people, especially in the US and worldwide, because of, where the virus was said to have originated from. And then in her email, she sent me a whole list of YouTube videos with titles like, Asian man gets punched on San Francisco subway, one after the other, and one even happened in South Africa. So because we were in retreat, I was not about to watch these videos, right? And then at the end, of course, she asked, very concerned, so how are you doing as an Asian person in the US? Are you safe? So that was quite, startling to receive when you're in the silence of retreat. So of course, I wrote back to her and assured her, we're in a monastery, everything is fine. But at that time, it really planted a seed in my mind, and I started to get fearful. Wondering like what's happening outside. And when I read news reports too, the news just wasn't good. All these people were just getting attacked, whether they were Vietnamese or Korean or just because of looking like a Chinese person. So the first time when we left the Abbey, when I left the Abbey after retreat, it was to go into Newport to run some errands at the post office. And I was quite fearful. I don't know what to expect, but I really thought, maybe I'll just go out and get punched on the street. Who knows, right? What's going on in the world? That's where my mind was, after retreat, clearly not very focused during it. But so, I was kind of vigilant going into town. And so Venerable Jigme dropped me off at the post office. She had other things to do, and so I got in line. And again, because of retreat, I hadn't used my debit card for a really long time. So when I was trying to make payment, I couldn't figure out what the PIN was. I stood there like, oh no, And there's a line behind, right? I'm like, and to my great surprise, the woman behind me tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, let me pay for you. And I went, no. I was just so shocked. She was a worker at the Safeway on her break. I think she had her name tag, Safeway, I think Kylie, And I said, no, please no. And the woman behind the cashier at the post office said, it's not a small bill. It's quite a big one because I was running errands for the Abbey. So I said, okay, I'll just stop the transaction. I'll wait for Venerable Jigme to come back and pay cash. So, I got out of the line. But, that was just such a good reality check for me that I went into town kind of hyper-vigilant, on guard, expecting to be singled out or attacked. And of course, none of that happened. There was nothing but kindness that came from this complete stranger who just wanted to connect and help. And then the next time that I went into Spokane, the slightly bigger city near us, it was for the US citizenship interview. And again, I had all these thoughts like, oh, I don't know, maybe they don't want Chinese people in this country anymore, or, same kinds of thoughts, right? Because of, again, what you're reading in the press. And I thought, oh, they're going to give me a hard time at this interview. So I go in again, and of course, I've done the test many times, and I'm again going in hyper-vigilant for this interview. And then so I arrive, and no one's there because it's a pandemic time. And then finally, the USCIS officer came out and asked me to go in. And he looked Asian, maybe biracial. And again, there are not many Asian people in Spokane. So I thought, this is how they get you. They get someone who looks like you, who knows your background, who makes you feel at ease, and then they'll nail you in the interview that way. So my over-suspicious mind. So I go into this interview, and to my great surprise, he says, hey, your paperwork looks great. A bit like, this is going to be a formality. You're definitely going to clear. So I'm like, okay. So, we do the citizenship interview questions. I pass. And then at some point, he starts to make small talk with me. He asked me whether I've been to the Canadian border and all that. And I'm sitting there thinking, where is this going? No, I've not been to the Canadian border. Are you suspicious of something? Then he told me how he used to work at one of the land border crossings as an immigration officer. And he said, one day there was a bus that came to the immigration checkpoint. And the whole bus was filled with people who looked like you. And they were men. I said, oh, you mean they were Tibetan monks? He said, yes. And then he said, the land border checkpoint was very small. He said it's meant mainly for like cargo trucks. Yeah, not often, they don't process passengers often. So they were really surprised when this whole busload of Tibetan monks showed up. And they knew they were going to take a long time to process the monks, because there were just 1 or 2 staff there. And he said it was so amazing watching this big group of men come in. And he said they were so orderly and so peaceful and quiet, in this very tight, confined space that wasn't very comfortable. And so, they just waited their turn and then got through customs. And he said because of these monks coming into the space, he said the whole vibe of the building changed. And he can still remember how it felt. And so that's what he wanted to connect with me about. And I'm like, oh, okay. This person has a good impression of monastics. Oh, thank goodness. So the interview went very smoothly. He asked about our monastery, where we're located. Of course, I told him all that. So I was just so, again, surprised and deeply moved. I was so expecting hostility or not to be welcome. But there was nothing but kindness. I was also very moved by the idea that because other monastics had kept their precepts well or, given a good visualization and just embodied their practice, it has such a far-reaching impact. All the immigration officers that day were moved, and they could see what peace looks and feels like. So the impact of that, remembering, because I'm in robes, whatever I do, say, and how I interact with people has that kind of impact too. So I just wanted to share these stories because they're just a good reminder for me not to get worried for no reason, not to let the mind proliferate, especially when it's not necessarily based on your direct experience of reality, that I still have deep faith in the kindness of others. It's very funny, but I've been asked a couple of times too, whether by family members or people in Singapore, or even a reporter here in the US, like, have you faced difficulties after COVID-19? Do you experience more hostility? And my answer is always no. I almost feel like they don't want to hear that answer. I think I did this whole interview with this reporter, and I don't think it was ever made public. So I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if you want the story that fits whatever the public line is. Yeah. But I'm not saying racism doesn't exist. I'm not saying people are not getting harmed. Yeah. But from my day-to-day experience right now, I am supported by the kindness of others. And I am so deeply grateful for that. So I just wanted to share that, especially if you read the news and are alarmed or it has a negative impact on your mind, to remember that these daily acts of kindness are constantly happening around us. They're not making it to the front page. And that's what keeps our society together and going.